You are now listening to Discover Your Potential with radio talk show host Dan Gilman, Cindy Gilman's son. So listen, participate, be inspired. Know that you can discover your potential. Here is Dan Gilman.
Welcome, everyone. This is Dan Gilman, and I'm here with MaryTerhune is here with me today, and I'm really excited about this is the addendum to the first part of the show. Hi, Mary. It's good to have you back.
Hi, Dan. Nice to be back with you.
And so today we wanted to not only discuss your book, which we didn't really get a chance to discuss in length last week, and also we want to discuss too your relationship with Wayne Dyer and also your website as well. So let's start with Out of the Blue. Actually, I have this copy. You can explain.
Yeah, I will. So at any rate, before I met Wayne and before the book was published by Hay House, I had published my self-published version of Out of the Blue back in 2007. And the reason that I even wrote this book was that in 2006, I had a fatal heart attack and actually died on the doorsteps of a hospital, was brought back, and it was so severe that it took me a year to recover. And in that year, I really couldn't do much. So I really felt I should write this book, Out of the Blue, to share the amazing spontaneous spiritual awakenings I had that started in 1984. And not only that, but by this time I had a grandson, and he had come to me in a dream when he was a little baby. And I write about this in the dedication. And in the dream, as a little baby, he was laying in his crib, and I walked over to him, and all this light was pouring out of him. And he spoke these words to me. I'm going to read it. God is consciousness. I am consciousness. Everything is consciousness. The people need to know. I'm glad you're here with me, Mary. I like the name Mary. And so in many ways, I felt I couldn't leave this earth without granting his wish that I write about. That's what I took it as, his wish that I write about what happened to me and the consciousness of divinity that I opened up to, and how that impacted my life and my whole experience of the medical field as a retired RN. And so in 2007, I self-published this book. Of course, it didn't go much anywhere, but it was on Amazon, available on Amazon. And in 6 years later, I happened to be talking with a colleague of mine who asked me, well, I said, I think I need to do something else with this book. And she goes, well, what would you like to see happen? And I said, I would like everyone to be able to read it. And she said, well, then you're going to have to send it to somebody like, I don't know, Wayne Dyer. And so I said, really? And she said, yes. So that was a Monday. I went to the post office. I mailed the book to Wayne Dyer. I didn't have his address, but I knew that he lived in Maui. So I addressed it, Dr. Wayne Dyer, best-selling author, Maui, Hawaii. And to my shock, apparently it arrived 5 days later on a Friday, that Friday. And that night, I happened to be staying up very late, and I never stay up late. But I was watching this video, and I was so engaged in it that I didn't recognize it was midnight. And so all of a sudden, my phone is ringing. And you know how that is. The phone rings at midnight, and you think something horrible has happened. I didn't recognize the number, but for some reason, I took the call. And I picked up the line, and it said, hello, Mary. And I go, yeah. And he goes, well, this is Wayne Dyer. And I was so shocked and stunned. I just said, oh, hi, Wayne. And he says, I want you to know that I got your book. And I never open up books because I never even open up the envelopes usually, because I get hundreds of people sending me books. and I just pile them up and give them to the library. But because you addressed it, Dr. Wayne Dyer, best-selling author, Maui Hawaii, and it got to me, I was so amused that I opened up your book. And the chapter that touched his heart was my explanation of my experience of self-realization. And he said that it was the best written explanation of self-realization he has ever read in his 30 years. And he said, and I've read them all. And then he said, I'd like you to come to my Divine Love seminar in Maui in January. That would be 2014. And of course I said yes. And he goes, I'd like you to be a sort of a surprise guest. I said, fine. So I went to his seminar, and it was an amazing experience. There were other authors there, of course, speaking. And I got to speak with people briefly and answer questions. So that was quite an experience with Wayne. And we spent like 3 days together, all of us, all the other speakers there. And I will tell a story about, in part 2, I'll tell a story about what happened with one of the speakers and her, that she actually wrote about in this book. Because on the stage, when at the seminar, Wayne read the entire chapter of self-realization in this book, and it took about 20 minutes. And when he was about to read it, he said, I'm going to read this chapter on self-realization, and I have never read from another author's book before, ever. And it's going to take about 20 minutes. And when he finished reading it, he said, don't you wish you could meet, because I was a surprise guest, don't you wish you could meet this author, the person who wrote this? And people are going, yes. There was about 600 people in the room. Wow. And they're going, yes, yes. And he goes, well, it just so happens she's here. And so he invited me up on stage. And then he announced that Hay House would be writing another edited sort of expanded version of this book, that Hay House would be publishing it. And that's how this book got published. Now, the story behind this is it got published in November 2015. But Wayne died 3 months before, in August, much to everyone's shock. And of course, everyone was very saddened by it. So he was the one who was really the promoter of this book. And he was the one who promoted all the new authors who were coming to Hay House. And without him promoting this book, it never got promoted. So it did come out. It was printed in November of 2015. But since he was the one promoting it, it never got promoted. So fast forward 6 years later, I realized I needed to do something else with this book. And I really wanted to get my rights back if it wasn't going to go anywhere, because I still felt I was fulfilling my grandson's desire that the people need to know about this consciousness, this divine consciousness. And as it turned out, an entertainment lawyer contacted me, this woman, out of the blue, contacted me, calls me up and says, listen, I heard you give a talk on one of the radio stations here in Boston. And she said, you're the real deal. She said, I really like what you have to say. And I was explaining to her about my book, and she goes, I'm surprised, I didn't hear more of your book being promoted. And I explained the situation. And she said, well, I'm going to help you get your rights back so you can do whatever you want to do with this book and perhaps go in a different direction. She said, maybe a movie, something where there's more graphics shown about what happens when your Kundalini divine energy awakens, so that people can see a visual of this. And I said, that's interesting, because that's something I've always wanted to do, because a picture paints 1,000 words, and you can even have an inner awakening from seeing visually what is actually occurring, and an understanding too. So I did end up, she did help me get my rights back, and that happened in the latter part of 2020 into 2021. By that time, by Christmas time, I had my rights back. So that's the story of the book. And I have, interestingly enough, when Wayne read from my book, the original one in Maui at his workshop, that recording was saved. And so I have that on my website, the front page of Wayne reading as it happened that day in January 2014 and what he had to say about it. So people can access that right on the front page.
That's great. And your website is?
MaryTerhune.com. My name.com. Right, MaryTerhune.com. And I have other media recordings of interviews that I've done. That's also available on the website. And if people want to set up an appointment to speak to me personally, either about their spiritual questions or about the bioenergetic system of homeopathic medicine that I came into quite in another mystical experience, they can contact me from that website.
I know we'll be going over that in the second part, so I'm looking.
We're going to be going over that in the second part, and it was quite amazing to me, as you know, with my background in medicine and so-called alternative medicine. I was just shocked about my introduction to homeopathic medicine as the bioenergetic medicine, and one that we're evolving into as we're evolving, as humanity is evolving into their divine dimension within them, awakening to it. We're also going to be awakening to an evolution in medicine and an evolution in all fields, actually. And we're seeing that happening right now. We're going through enormous transformations in the world that have just never happened before, and especially the spiritual awakenings that are happening. People are opening up to this dimension within themselves, their consciousness as their true divine nature, and being freed from that egoic structure of individuality and separation and fear to move into an extraordinary experience of and reclaiming themselves as Brahman, this ultimate field of omniscience that lives in them as them, which is an extraordinary leap. It's not a little leap, it's just an extraordinary leap. And omniscience, omni means above science, so the highest science, the omniscience of one's divine nature, and how that is playing out now as we're reclaiming our sovereignty, our bodily sovereignty, our total sovereignty within ourselves. And so I'm going to be talking about this in part 2. So didn't know where you wanted to go from here.
Well, we'll wrap up this quick addendum and we'll go right into our part 2. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This is Cindy Gilman, and you're listening to Discover Your Potential. So until next time, do something nice for yourself, but do something nice for someone else.
In every way, every day, I need less of myself, I need more him. 'Cause his is the